Open up your eyes and see all the fun and mystery. Take an African adventure with Darren and Destiny. From the mountains to the shore, so many things to explore. Take an African adventure with Darren and Destiny.
What's going on, everybody? Hope that you are doing well. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jay Cameron. Welcome to Maximum Impact as we bridge the gap between Africa and the African diaspora. And today we have another powerful episode as we continue to share, quote unquote, Black history all year long. And again, the only reason why we say it like that is so that people understand exactly who we're identifying. But there's history. They just concluded Black History Month in America. But we continue to talk about the history of those who are indigenous to the continent of Africa and other people, other melanated people who may not be from Africa, because what we want to do is make sure that these stories are not lost. These stories are told, and when these stories are told, it helps to change the narrative. And then you understand that everything does not go back to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Christopher Columbus and Magellan and all the quote-unquote great explorers. But there's so many other people who are great explorers, but their stories will never be told. Their stories have been erased. Oftentimes I'll go to these different places, these different plantations or whatever. And when you get there, you begin to realize that the stories of those who built those places, you'd never hear those stories. But the person who may have funded it, their name is on it. George Washington's Mount Vernon, the Washington Monument. You know, you ask yourself, who built these places? So now, as we begin to understand how just decimated the history of America is, including Africa as well, because you you begin to realize how intertwined they are. And when someone was talking about, oh, this is really good, and this was food for thought, because Elliot's going to break down some good stuff. I'm actually going to be going to Houston to meet up with him, and we're going to go talk more about the Sugarland 95 in a second. But someone made a statement, and they were talking about how they don't understand why so-called African Americans, so-called Black people, so-called all of this are hopping on Africa. And they're like, well, why y'all hopping on Africa? Because it seems like they got corruption in Africa, and they got poverty in Africa. They have all these issues in Africa. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself now, if we really, it's as if corruption is not in America. It's almost like, because I'll give you another good example. When I was in Sierra Leone, this dude came. He was like, man, I don't know why y'all over there in Sierra Leone. You need to get on back over here in America and get back with your tribe over here in America. You need to get on back over here in America. And I'm thinking to myself, I said, now this person probably means well within their own mind, but I'm going through this whole thing, and I'm saying to myself, it's borderline silly when you really start getting to the nuts and bolts of it. America owes us money. America this, that, and the other. America was built on the backs and blood, but my ancestors, and America did this, that, and the other. And I'm saying, yeah, this is true. This is true, and America does owe Black Americans. America does. There's no argument about it. But guess what? America owes Africa just as much as it owes Black Americans, and South America owes Brazilians and Colombians and Guyanans, Guyanese. They owe all of them. So all of these people are owed. But we'll just focus on America for a hot second. Any wealth that came by way of those who descend from Africa in America, Africa is owed too. And then somebody said, well, they sold them into slavery, and they sold them, and they sold them, and they did that, and they sold them, and they sold me into slavery. First of all, you ain't never been into slavery, first of all. Maybe mental, but not that kind of slavery, not chattel slavery. We can't even begin to think about what chattel slavery was like. So when I started getting beneath the surface and past the rhetoric and understanding that our trauma in America is no different than the trauma that occurred in Africa. There's no different than the trauma that occurred, our ancestors' trauma, I should say, no different than the trauma that occurred in Haiti and Jamaica and Brazil. Let's even go back over 100 years before chattel slavery happened in America. It was going on in Brazil with the Portuguese. And most people even, this tells you how jacked up and how controlled our history is, because we really believe that slavery started with the British. We really believe 1619 is when it all started. We really believe 403 years ago, well, almost 403 years ago, that's when it started. Well, it started maybe in America, but 100 years before that in Brazil. Nobody talks about that. They're descendants of slavery too. Nobody talks about them. So when we get into this thing and we start having this or slavery supremacy conversation, it just really begins to reveal, again, another effect of colonization, and how misinformed and uneducated we are on this particular topic. So that's why we have these conversations, because you got to come at it. You got to come at it because you got people out here who have their whole life is into this thing. And again, nobody is debating whether or not America owes reparations. People do debate it. They're not going. First of all, what you got to understand is that these people, the system was built to do exactly what it's done. It's not built to give people back. It's those people who were taken, the ancestors who were taken from Africa and brought over, they weren't even considered human. They were considered like chickens and goats and livestock. So to even try to rationalize the mentality of the system was not created as such. Now, of course, you fight for it. Of course, when you get in a position of leverage, you do what you need to do. But I say it all the time, if Black lives matter, then it need to matter all over the world. Because I hear a lot of people saying that in America, but they don't care about the people in Haiti until it's politically convenient. Until a topic like Afghanistan comes up and they're flying people from over in Afghanistan and refugees and everything, and probably flying them over from Ukraine soon and that whole deal, then that's when now they might rise up and say, well, what about the ones from Haiti that y'all whipping and turning them back at the border? That's when that crowd begins to get a little bit vocal about it. But if you're going to really be about quote unquote Black life, it has to matter all over, because everybody shares that common history who are descendants of that nonsense that occurred. Everybody shares it. The traumas are the same for everybody who went through it. People think slavery wasn't happening in Africa. They're thinking, oh man, those people in Africa, they sold my ancestors into slavery. They sold them into slavery, man, and they just ran off in the lap of luxury. Like they just like that was just this conglomerate. They just sold all these millions of people into slavery and they ran off in the lap of luxury. But then when you go over to the continent and you understand exactly what happened, that there were segments of the population who were doing that, but not the entire population. There were parts of Africa that wasn't even doing that type of slavery, not that European chattel slavery. So every African ethnic group was not involved in it. But somehow the whole continent gets blamed for it in somebody's mind, because they've been reading these history books over here, and then they get hooked up with these jackleg historians that start trying to tell them stuff, and then they run off half-cocked in the wrong direction, and got millions of people following this stuff. It's like, it baffles me. It's like really? I mean, I equate it to being on the same level as QAnon. You just make up something and put it in the air, and people just follow it. They just run with it. They don't even fact check it. They don't even, because it taps into some sort of trigger or some sort of emotion in them, and they just go with it. They just go buck wild, hog wild. That's what I said earlier. They go hog wild with that thing, and it's like, yo, chill, just chill for a second. Let's slow it down. Let's slow it down. I mean, when I was in Africa, there was this lady. She used to be a troll. Notice I said used to be a troll. And no matter what I did, you need to get back over to America. You need to get back over to America and be back with your tribe. You need to get on back over with your tribe. And I'm saying to myself, listen, my tribe, I got multiple tribes. I got many tribes. I got a whole lot of tribes going on. I'm trying to track them down. But it's what I learned and discovered in Africa that brought me back to America, that even prompted an interest in me wanting to go to the Yoruba village in South Carolina, which I'm going to feature. And this is not like some little makeshift Yoruba replica village. It's not like something that people just kind of made up as a mockery. This thing has been here 51 years. 51 years. This community is seceded from the state of South Carolina and has been there 51. I think this will be the 52nd year. I think it'll be 52 this year. And has the traditions, has the cultures, knows everything. It is a fascinating place to go. A Yoruba village right outside of Beaufort, South Carolina. When you go, you're like, and then see, and right around that time, I went to Nigeria right around that time. I'm able to bridge the gap in my mind. That's what that whole image is. When you see me standing there with the hands together like that in the background in the bridge right over my shoulder here, that's what I'm saying. So when people talk about one or the other, I always say both, because when you get both understanding, you realize that we have more in common than anything else. That's why I take people over so they can see for themselves. And I am adamant. I do not play with the peanut gallery, because there's a whole lot of peanut gallery out here. And really, I believe the peanut gallery is what keeps us twisted. I mean, it really does. As a matter of fact, I talk about being twisted in the second one in the interview with Elliot. So anyway, that's the bottom line. I mean, again, sometimes people don't like the way I say it or whatever. Hey, it is what it is. It is what it is. I mean, either you want the truth or you don't. I mean, it's like, it is what it is. And when you begin to learn how jacked up this stuff is and how so many people are just, man, I could tell y'all some stories. But anyway, I'm talking to Elliot. And Elliot, he's just a cool brother. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to let him break it down. Elliot is a cool brother, and he's going to share a lot of knowledge today. I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that you take this information about the Sugarland 95 to heart. Share this video, click the like button, and let's educate ourselves. Let's get the peanut gallery out of our minds. Let's learn something new from this side of the Atlantic. Here's Elliot. I tell you, we keep bringing folks on this program that are not afraid to drop some real knowledge. The reality is that our history books, most of our history books have failed us tremendously, whether it be in America or Canada or the UK or anywhere in Africa. And it's our responsibility to educate ourselves with the information that we get. And that's what I'm doing here as a part of Maximum Impact and Bridging the Gap, bringing the information that most of us do not know. And what I'm discovering is that it's empowering people across the board. People are learning in the Congo, people are learning in Australia, people are learning in Germany, people are learning in Tanzania, people are learning in Rwanda, South Africa. I'm getting emails from all over, including the United States and Canada and the Caribbean. And so that all of this is powerful, because one of the greatest weapons we have to fight with is information and accurate education. And what we're able to do by having these critical thought conversations is to bring up discussions that may be uncomfortable for some people. But I'm willing to have a conversation about any topic. It could be anything. It might not even be something I'm feeling, but I'm willing to have a conversation about it because I ultimately want the truth. So with that said, this brother right here is a part of the Fun Bunch. And they were there in October 2021. He had his birthday. You had a birthday in Ghana. You had a whole lot going on. We talk about some of that other stuff at another time. You had a lot going on. But in our interview, you started dropping some gems that caught my attention. And you started talking about Sugarland, Texas. And I never heard anything about Sugarland, Texas. I didn't know anything about Texas at all. And then you started dropping some knowledge. And I said, this would be good for you to come back and to share even more about Sugarland, Texas. Everybody, Mr. Elliot Jordan, he is back. He is back. He's now in Texas right now. And I'm going to have to come down to Texas because this information is intriguing. And I like to see for myself. As someone reminded me, one of the people that watched from Russia said, now you always say you're going to see for yourself. I said, I think I might need to go down to H-Town and see what's going on. So anyway, Elliot, how you doing, man?
Doing great.
All right, so you got some gems for us today. What? How are you going to educate us? Because they got us twisted worse than Keith Sweat and Cut Close out there. You ain't see that one coming. You ain't see that coming. See? Tell it on myself.
Yeah. That's real close.
That's R&B right there. That's some good old school. Anyway, so what
Yeah.
you got for us today?
So remember we was in Ghana, and I started talking about the Sugarland 95 out here in Sugarland.
Yes.
And so I got some background information as far as circumstances of events that led up to that tragedy. So basically, the Sugarland 95 were discovered during the construction of a high school out here in Sugarland, Fort Bend County, and they stopped the construction so that they could excavate, because they discovered that this was a mass grave. And come to find out, these were young, middle-aged, somewhat old African Americans who were part of the prison lease program after the Civil War. And they were working on a plantation that changed a few hands over time, before, during, and after the Civil War, and basically worked to the bone. The prison lease program in Texas was basically the continuation of slavery, pretty much up until the early 1900s.
Okay.
And so I've got 19 slides to kind of bring a little bit of history of Texas, how Texas got started, and all the way up through the Civil War and up to what happened with the Sugarland 95. It's about 19 slides, okay. And I'll try to go a little quick with it. I've got some background information to add to what I got in the slides. And then there's an official write-up about the Sugarland 95, where they moved, the remains to, and what the school is, and things of that nature.
Okay. All right, let's break it on down. I think you go ahead and share your screen. I think you have the ability to do that with no problem. And one of the reasons why this is important, again, this is how we bridge the gap, and this is how we get information out here, and we educate ourselves and not trusting it to any school system, because unless the school system is intentional about teaching all of the stories about all of the people who've contributed to the story here in America, then that school system is bogus. And I said that myself. Yes, and I mean it. Bogus if they're not including the people that built this country and from an accurate perspective. All right, the agenda.
So as I go through, I'm going to talk about before Texas was Texas, because before we even heard of Texas, before this was even the United States of America, this part of the country was owned by somebody else, explored by somebody else, lived on by somebody else, a lot of people basically. Then I'm gonna get into the Republic of Texas, which was a 9-year period where Texas was its own country, if you can believe that.
I can believe it.
Then we'll get into Sugarland, how Sugarland got started, and what led into the tragedy of the Sugarland 95.
All right.
And so I kind of took this title from the dedication they had for the Sugarland 95, and they titled it Found and Not Forgotten. And they got me thinking about a few things. As we go through this, I'm gonna point out some things that gave me some revelations.
Okay. So
to start, you got to know who explored, because we had some explorers, came through here a few hundred years ago. So when you think about how this country got started and who owned what, first it was the British, then there was the French, then there was the Spanish. So those were the three major powers that was basically conflicting and manipulating, fighting over land to end up with what this country looks like now, basically. And a lot of stuff happened at the same time, as well. And so when you look at this here, the Spanish and the French were mainly the two powers that explored east of the Mississippi. Now, in the beginning, we had the British with 13 colonies and things of that nature. And, they had factions and interfactions. They were trading and making manipulative deals with Native Americans and different tribes and things of that nature. French and the Spanish were doing the same thing.
Got a little Dutch in there too, a little Dutch,
Little Dutch too.
Yeah.
So, as you see here, Pineda was an explorer coming through here. Cabeza de Vaca, who's Spanish, was coming through here.
That name sounds real slick though. Cabeza de Vaca.
Yeah.
Cabeza
These
de
are
Vaca.
Spanish conquistadors.
Yeah, that name sounds slick. But go ahead, don't mind me. Don't mind me.
and settled, in this part of the country. We like to think as the beginning of Texas as the beginning of the Wild Wild West, pretty much.
Okay.
Because there was a lot of intermingling, fighting with Native Americans, fighting the French and the Spanish, as well as what our current schools would call early settlers, but they were also colonizers as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even today, when you look at some of the names of the towns and cities in Texas, they're either Spanish or they're going to be French. And they're going to have a lot of background behind those names as well. And so LaSalle, which is a French explorer, he came through here. He actually settled in not too far from here to the southwest in a place called Fort St. Louis. And Fort St. Louis used to be located almost halfway to Corpus Christi. If you can picture where Corpus Christi is in Texas, it's right along the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
And I would say about an hour and a half to the northeast is where Matagorda Bay is. And Fort St. Louis was there. And so, go to the next one. When LaSalle settled at Fort St. Louis, and when I look at this map, it's going to be somewhere around here where my cursor is.
Mm-hmm.
And the Karankawa Indian tribe pretty much owned that territory during that time. And that fort didn't last too long because the Karankawa took it over, killed everybody. And that's basically where LaSalle was killed also.
Right along there, okay.
But just like everywhere else, and all the stories with Native American tribes in different parts of the country, when foreigners come, what are they going to do? Defend their land.
Right.
And so there was constant conflicts and Native American attacks, when the conquistadors came and the French came, through Texas. And this is just the layout of all of the Native American tribes that existed prior to 1800, in the 1700s and 1800s.
Very interesting.
Now, when we get around 1800, a lot of the French and the Spanish were conflicting over territory and land. They were, the Spanish were setting up presidios and missions to protect themselves against the constant attacks from Native American tribes. The French were basically establishing settlements when they came. And so
when you say missions, when you say missions, what do you mean?
So when I talk about a mission is basically a building that the Spanish constructed to
like a fort, kind of like a fort.
You could say almost like a fort. So when you think about what happened in San Antonio with the Alamo was a mission. It was basically a religious place where people would come to worship, almost like a church.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah.
So that's what it was. Oh, okay.
It's before it became. That's before it became a fort.
Okay.
Presidios were set up to protect those missions. So they were kind of like military outposts in different parts of the state and things of that nature. It's just so that the Spanish can continue putting their roots down, their feet down, and protect their
And
establishment.
what was their religion? What was the religion that they were establishing?
They were mostly Catholicism.
Okay.
French were mostly Christian,
Okay.
and so they were taking over, Native American territory, and capturing Native Americans, converting them to Catholic, and be indentured servants, things of that nature.
Okay. So basically enslaving them, pretty much the same thing they did with
Pretty much they
from Africa.
pretty much the same way they did us.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at what Texas used to be, Mexico and the Spanish pretty much owned this part of the country. And that territory was a result of the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War was a battle between, of course, the French and Native American tribes, as well as the British, over specific issue of whether the upper Ohio River Valley was part of the British. And so there were Native American tribes that sided with the British. There were Native American tribes that sided with the French, as well as the Spanish, over territory. But the problem was there were factions within those Native American tribes that sided with different superpowers, the same tribe, factions within the same tribe. And so a lot of problems, were created out of that. And as a result of the French and Indian War, the Treaty of Paris was developed. Paris was developed in 1763, at which point the French had gained some territory west of the 13 colonies. And so the British ended up ceding some territory west of the 13 colonies as a result of the French and Indian War. And the Spanish basically owned everything else west of the Mississippi.
Got it.
Now, Spanish pretty much owned Mexico, or what we know as Mexico. And this is what Mexico used to look like before it became Texas. From here all the way to California, that included some parts of Oklahoma, Colorado, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico. All that was Mexico.
Interesting. This is very reminiscent of Africa. I'm looking at these borders that were created, the states, the countries, the same. Right. So you're looking at it and you're like, wow, this is okay.
And so when you think about the current immigration issue that's going on today, can you really blame these people for coming back across the border?
Oh, not at all. Well, I mean, I don't even, when you have a country that is nothing but immigrants, especially from those who came from Europe and.
Exactly.
I don't blame that. The reality is when it comes to this world, everything's about resources.
Yeah.
And if you can get your resources, how have you got to get your resources? Because it's not like this land was taken justly. That's the thing I look at. It's not like it was taken by, we did this the right way. It was stolen. So the thief is now trying to say, no, you can't come take back your stuff. It's wild. Or you can't, I'm going to try to, and don't get me wrong. I understand you just can't have mass hysteria coming because it'll overwhelm the system. But it's like we have this, and of course it's wild when we say it, but there's this righteous indignation that people have, keep them out. But it's like, don't you understand that this land was stolen from people? This is not even the land it's not even the stuff that we're arguing over. We can't even really argue, but we're here. So I get it. But it's like, yeah. So I do understand why they come across. I get it.
Exactly. And so this is Mexico, around the 1800s. And so just a quick rundown of the parts of the country that were owned by these three superpowers. Of course, you got the 13 colonies over here, ran by the British. They ceded this territory in 1783 to the French, and then came the Louisiana Purchase
Right.
that this country bought from the French. And so that covered a lot of Louisiana, all the way up through the Midwest, all the way over to Montana. You got the Texas annexation in 1845. That ended the Republic of Texas. And then you've got Mexican cession in 1848. And this was going on. This was basically happening when people were discovering gold on the West Coast and in Oregon, things of that nature. And so basically robbing, raping, and pillaging, the more west you go.
And this was not that long ago. That's the part. I'm looking at these dates. It wasn't that long ago. We're talking about not even 200 years ago.
Right.
I mean, for some of it was more than 200 years, like 1803, that was more than 200 years, but 1783. But I'm looking at some of the most recent, 1853, 1848, 1846, 1845. I mean, we're creeping up on 200 years. So, this is not long at all.
Not long ago at all.
History and time, and
And, you know, at the same time all this was going on, there was the Trail of Tears with Native American tribes, you know, being moved out of their native lands into reservations and stuff like that. There's a whole lot of craziness going on at the same time.
Yeah.
And so these are all the treaties, the conflicts and agreements that were happening before Texas was Texas.
Okay.
You know, between the period of 1754 to 1845. So we start with the French and Indian War. After that, the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1763. Then the Louisiana Purchase, where this country bought that middle part of the territory for $15 million, which eventually created Missouri, Arkansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Texas, really some parts of Texas. And I'll get into some more of that. Colorado, Montana, Oklahoma, North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Nebraska, New Mexico, and Wyoming. Then there was the Mexican War for Independence from Spain. So, you know, Mexico was fighting Spain because they were tired of their
colonial rule
and slavery and stuff like that. From September 16, 1810 to September 27, 1821. Then Mexico outlawed slavery in 1821. I'm gonna get into some more of that because there's some Black history in there. The Coahuila y Tejas merger in 1824, which established a new constitution involving 19 Mexican states, which included Texas and 4 territories to protect from Native American attacks, mainly from the Apache and Comanche.
Okay.
And finally, the Treaty of Velasco in 1836 that was signed to basically establish the Republic of Texas.
Okay.
Now, this is, of course, this is what Mexico looked like, but then these are the 4 territories in the 19 states that consisted of all of Mexico. And the Coahuila y Tejas agreement is basically this area here.
Okay.
From, you know, parts of Texas going into Mexico. And what did that constitution consist of? So this is where the Black history comes in, and this is where funk is going to start hitting the fan.
Oh, right. I'm ready for the funk to hit the fan. I'm ready.
Yeah, I got that from the Steve Harvey show where he was performing with the High Tops, the song with the High Tops.
Oh, that's what he said. Funk was about to hit the fan.
Yeah. So meet brother President Vicente Ramon Guerrero Saldana.
All right.
Did you know Mexico had a Black president?
Oh, I'm sure. I didn't know that, but I'm sure there have been quite a few.
Yeah. So around this time, there were as many as 3 million slaves in Mexico before slavery was abolished. and they were all of, African, Mexican descent.
Because you had indigenous populations too, I think a lot of times in
The
these
business populations too.
Yeah. And then you had those who were, I believe that there were people who even came from Africa before the transatlantic slave trade. Now that's
Right,
just,
right.
just because the boats were there. You go to Egypt, you see the boats. They had the capabilities to be on boats, and it wasn't like the Europeans were the only explorers. So but again, that's a different conversation. But when you say this, no, I see where, you had the indigenous population, you had the African population, and then of course you had the European population. So this is very interesting to see how this going. It look like he got a little texture in his hair too. Look like he got
Oh,
look like he got a little something going on there. Okay, go ahead.
So he was the first and only Black person to become president of Mexico, and he served from 18. Let me go to his deal here. He served in office April 1829 to December 1829. So just a few months, basically.
Oh, really? Just a few months?
Right. Now, before that, he served in the military, which constituted this agreement between Coahuila and Tejas to abolish slavery.
Okay.
And so it was a lot of fighting between Mexico and Spain, to result in this.
Okay.
He was born on August 9th, 1783 in Tixla, Mexico, to his father, Juan Pedro Guerrero, who was African descent and Mexican, and his mother, Guadalupe Saldana, who was Native Mexican.
Okay.
Now, under this Constitution, all existing slaves coming into Texas were declared free. That's if people already owned slaves and they were coming in to settle and, build their lives and stuff like that. If they already had slaves, they were declared free on the spot.
Okay.
They also allowed settlers who already owned slaves to come to Texas, but could not buy additional slaves. So they had to work with what they already had. Any slave brought into Texas would be declared free within 6 months. So if they violated this second statute, then the slave that they bring in is free after 6 months. And then the sale and purchase of new slaves was, of course, forbidden. Couldn't buy any new slaves. And any child born to a slave was declared free when he or she reaches age 14.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of Black history about this man here.
All right. President Vicente Saldana. Ramon Guerrero Saldana.
Yeah. Now we're going to get to the fight before the fight. So because of the Coahuila y Tejas Constitution, those people coming into Texas already disagreed with it. They weren't trying to have, that law, in place for too long. So on April 6th in 1830, a series of laws were passed to further restrict immigration in Texas because people were not following the 1829 agreement. June 1832, armed settlers and colonizers, they marched to a military base in Anahuac and deposed Commander Juan Davis Bradburn, who was a Mexican commander in the Mexican army. There was a second group that forced the surrender of another military commander at the Battle of Velasco, which is now Surfside Beach. Surfside Beach is probably, let's say, about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive from here.
Okay.
To the coast. And so that's where that battle took place. Then the Civil War broke out, and the Mexican federal government wanted to move to a more centralized government so that they can understand what's actually going on as people are moving west into Texas and part of their territory. But Enter General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. He revolted. He was a military general in the Mexican army, and he disagreed with the centralized government because he wanted those laws to change. And a lot of the Texian settlers and colonizers were siding with him for different reasons. And of course, they wanted the Mexican laws to change so that they can have their slavery and everything and live their lives, but they also wanted statehood, separate from Mexico. And we'll talk about some people that came into Texas, that were, siding with Santa Anna for a while.
Okay.
In, November 1833, they were meeting with the then Mexican president and officials to persuade them to change these laws. Santa Anna didn't become president until 1835. And he basically revoked the Constitution of 1824, which was that agreement between Coahuila and Texas, or Tejas. And that gave settlers a reason to take up arms and revolt against Mexico. So when you see the Mexican president disagreeing with the current agreement, that gives all the colonizers all the reason to say, yeah, let's do this.
All of them, because they definitely unify with one another when they have a common interest.
Exactly. And so this is the fight. This is all of the battles and conflicts that happened during the Texas Revolution. The first shot was fired on October 2nd, 1835 at the Battle of Gonzales. And we got the map over here to show where all these battles, took place. Then there was the Siege of Bear. Bear is actually where San Antonio is in the Alamo. Okay. So Siege of Bear is basically where Texas rebels, just basically you just calling people off the street, just banded together and took over this area in and around San Antonio. And the mission that was known to be called the Alamo. And it wasn't shortly thereafter in February that the Battle of Alamo begins, because the Mexican army actually, protected the Alamo before it was taken over. Then there was the Convention of 1836, where they were basically discussing changing these Mexican laws and requesting or demanding Texas have its own statehood, things of that nature. March, 4 days later, the Alamo falls. And so now Texas is taking over the Alamo. Then there was the Goliad Massacre later on that month. April of 1836 was the Battle of San Jacinto, which is northeast of Houston. And there's a whole memorial there about the Battle of San Jacinto. And this was the site where Texas independence was basically demanded and began.
Okay.
There are people like Stephen F. Austin and Sam Houston involved in this battle. Santa Anna is taken prisoner in May of 1836, at which point the Treaty of Velasco, he's forced to sign the Treaty of Velasco as Mexican president, held captive to officially, designate Texas as a republic. And so Texas was its own country for 9 years until 1845, when it, officially became a U.S. state.
So it was its own country, it had its own president, had its own, all of that. Is that how it worked? Was their system set up in that colonial structure like that?
Yes. Texas had its own constitution and bylaws, and they had several presidents as well that were in office.
So where did they get the influence from as far as the bylaws? Because that sounds very British. That sounds like a very British kind of.
Yeah, a lot of stuff was taken from, the British law of governance and things of that nature. And so people like Sam Houston and Stephen F. Austin had, adopted some of those British laws.
Oh, and the names tell you everything right there.
Yeah,
David, that's
these
a
are
British. Yeah, I mean, you kind of
the
looking at
actual
it.
presidents that were in office during the Republic of Texas.
So was the Republic of Texas at that point in time a British influence? I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand. I know it had the Spanish aspect of it, but was it, because these names I'm looking at, like Jones? Well,
Yeah, it was a mixture of different backgrounds. So
okay.
British, French, like Marabou
Yeah, I was
Lamar.
gonna say Marabou's. That definitely sounds like a French.
I think Jones is British.
Okay.
And then there was there were a lot of settlers who were German, had German descent also.
Yeah, Germany was in the mix too. A lot of people don't know Germany was.
When you go to Central Texas, around between the area between San Antonio and Austin, you see a lot of people with German backgrounds living in that area.
Yeah.
So now we come to Sugarland, and Stephen F. Austin was dubbed the father of Texas because he was the guy that brought the first group of settlers, colonizers to Texas, known as the Old 300, to purchase land grants from Mexico in 1821. And so when they bought land in Texas, they either bought leagues or laborers or both. And the leagues, which consisted of 4,428 acres of land, was for ranching, your livestock, cows, and stuff like that. And the laborers consisted of 177 acres of land for farming. Now, there were some brothers that came along that were part of this old 300 that settled in what is now Sugarland. And this is Samuel May, Nathan, and Matthew Williams came along with Stephen F. Austin and were granted a league of land that they called the Oakland Plantation, where sugarcane was harvested by slave labor.
Okay, so now when you said brothers, you mean they're like biological brothers?
Yeah, these are biological brothers.
Okay, because sometimes people hear that.
Yeah,
they might think that they're brothers. Some brothers came along and they might be like, oh, but they were doing that. So these were actually biological brothers who came along.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they all partnered together to purchase this league of land in, what is now Sugarland. And so this is Samuel May here, and this guy is Nathan. Their little brother, Matthew, was basically their farmhand, or their foreman that ran the plantation.
Okay.
And this is where Sugarland got its start.
Okay.
They didn't actually name the city Sugarland until 1959 or something like that.
Okay.
When it officially became a city. In 1843, the Williams brothers built the Imperial Refinery Complex, or this is basically the first sugar mill that was built on the west bank of Oyster Creek. And so I got a map I'm gonna show in a little bit, where all these plantations used to be. In 1825, Stephen F. Austin's colony showed 443 slaves amongst the total population of 1,800 people. So this is right after they first got there and started setting up 443 slaves. By 1836, after the Treaty of Alaska was signed and the Republic of Texas started, that number grew to 5,000 in all of Texas. When Texas became a state, there were 30,000.
Okay.
And right before the Civil War, 182,566 slaves were in Texas. And sugarcane wasn't the main cash crop. It was cotton.
Cotton. Okay.
Next to that was sugarcane, and then they did some corn also. Now, this is where the plantation changes hands. In 1853, this guy here, Benjamin Franklin Terry and William Jefferson Cowell, partnered together to purchase the Oakland plantation from the Williams brothers and renamed it Sugarland. So they named the plantation Sugarland. And then they improved the sugar mill and started harvesting cotton with the cotton gin. And 8 years later, in 1861, Benjamin Franklin Terry, now he was a secessionist. He wanted, by this time, Texas to become, part of the Confederacy.
Oh, okay.
Civil War and stuff like that. And so, he would go to the legislature, voice his opinions and his views to kind of push it along. And so once Texas seceded from the Union, he organizes a group of Rangers called the Terry's Texas Rangers to fight in the Civil War. And of course, he didn't last long. He died in their first battle. And he was buried with honors, near his home in Sugarland.
You could probably still go to his grave to this day, I'm sure.
You can probably still, you can go to his grave. So after he died, William Jefferson Cowell took over the plantation until he died in 1864. And so when the Civil War started, and after the Civil War, it got hard to run the plantation because either we were escaping or we were running off to, find the Union Army and do some fighting, one of the two. And so the economy made it hard to maintain. When Kyle died in 1864, his heirs sold off the land, and Benjamin Franklin's Terry's remains were relocated and reinterred at Glenwood Cemetery in Houston. So you got to go to Houston, to visit his grave.
Okay. But his grave is out there. His grave is there.
Yeah. 1868. And see, this is where the plantation changes hands again. Confederate veteran Littlebury Ambrose Ellis purchases local property west of the Terry Cowell plantation. So he bought some land right next to where Benjamin Franklin Terry and William Jefferson Cowell had their land.
Really?
Yeah. Right after the Civil War, land prices dropped, so it was real cheap to buy land. And he named it after his eldest daughter, Satasha Ellis.
Okay.
And so in 1878, 10 years later, Littlebury joins another Confederate colonel, Edward H. Cunningham, this guy here at the bottom, to run the Texas penal system. This is where prison convict leasing starts after slavery is abolished. To continue cultivating crops. They also contracted convicts out to plant other plantations in the area. And, it got so profitable, they would call him Cunningham the Texas Sugar King. And we were calling it the hellhole on the Brazos because the Brazos River is not too far from here to the southwest because it was hot, humid. A lot of this land is pretty much swamp land. It's real soft. Rains out here, it's gonna flood real fast and take forever for the water to drain out. And it's the same kind of land as in Louisiana around New Orleans too.
So this low country, this is like below sea level.
It's close to sea level, but it's still above.
Okay.
It's not below like New Orleans.
Yeah.
It's above, but it's still swampy and soft.
Right, it's right there in that area.
Yeah. And full of mosquitoes too.
Yeah, and gators and crocodiles, I'm sure. And snakes.
So here's some more Black history. In 1870, between 1870 and 1890, after, the Civil War, and you probably know some of this, a lot of us were coming up in the world. We were getting our chances to vote. having more formidable opportunities to get jobs and stuff like that. A lot of us were Republicans before we were Democrats. And this brother here, named William Moses Burton, was a Republican senator from.
Now, this is a brother. This is a
This
brother.
is a brother. Yeah.
A brother, the qualified. Okay, this is a
Yeah.
brother. They can
This
look on the
is a
screen and
brother
say that's a
right
brother. He a brother for real. Okay.
This brother was born in North Carolina. And he came to Texas in 1850 to Fort Bend County after the Civil War. He had bought, several plots of land for $1,900, making him one of the wealthiest and most influential Black brothers in the county. He was elected sheriff in 1869 and tax collector. He was later elected Texas state senator and served a total of 7 years from 1874, 1875, and then again 1876 to 1882.
Okay.
While he was in office, he helped pass legislation to form the Alta Vista Agriculture and Mechanical College for colored youth on August the 4th, 1876, which is my alma mater, Prairie View A&M University. And I got the shirt on.
Okay, he got Prairie View, A&M. There you go. He representing. There you go.
Gotta represent HBCU. Another brother succeeded Brother Burton in 1870, Henry Clay Ferguson, as sheriff of Fort Bend County. And he was also elected county tax assessor from 1876 to 1888. And he became Texas State Republican Party chair in 1898.
Okay.
So, all because of the Emancipation Proclamation signed by Abraham Lincoln, a lot of us were Republicans after the Civil War.
Got it.
Now, back to Ellis and Cunningham. In 1883, the state had assumed control of the state penal system from Ellis and Cunningham. They had severed business ties, at which point Cunningham bought the land that Benjamin Franklin Terry and William Jefferson Kyle owned. So he bought that plantation back, which amassed 12,000 and 15,000 acres of land to continue leasing convict labor to work the land, harvesting sugarcane, cotton, and corn. And right around the turn of the century, it started getting hard because there was a real bad hurricane that came through here. Some people think it might have been a Category 5. Blew right through Galveston, flooded a lot of land, and destroyed a lot of plantations, including this plantation here. Okay. And so Cunningham lost some equipment, the plants died, and of course, poor management, caused him to file bankruptcy. So he pretty much lost the plantation. This is a map of what the plantations used to look like and how much land it covered. So this was the Cunningham plantation in blue here, the former Terry Kyle plantation, and this was Colonel Ellis and Cunningham plantation here on the left, the Satartia plantation. But there were other plantations out here too. Another one named the Sienna Plantation, which is another 2 miles down the highway from here, closer to the Brazos River. So this is the Brazos River right here.
Okay.
So there was another plantation a little further south of where these are. That was called the Sienna Plantation, and there's a whole subdivision and neighborhood built on top of it now.
Built on
so
top.
They got me to wondering, Are there other people buried up under all these neighborhoods and plantations, neighborhood and
Well,
subdivisions?
let me. That's interesting that you say that because when I was in Egypt, we were in Luxor, I believe. No, not Luxor. As somewhere it was one of those places, and they talked about how when the Romans came through, all basically what they did was they built their temples on top of what the ancient Egyptians had already had. I said, so underneath this, there's
Mhm.
something else, and they're like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
underneath that they bit it. So and then you found out about the how they built the dam, and the dam basically ran the Nubians out, and they just flooded their whole communities and just moved them. So I would not doubt. I mean, if you really want to hide something, you bury it deep underneath because who's going to move a building to go to excavate it?
yeah, and I always have to question whether since we have all this certification out here now, and if you drive through some of the neighborhoods and subdivisions, they're named after plantations.
Oh yeah, they got the plantation still standing in South Carolina with the Magnolia Plantation, and
Yeah.
it's like, and people and black people getting married there, posted up. They up there, yeah, girl, look, I got married at the plantation.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, yeah, great point.
Yeah, and my aunt and uncle on my dad's side used to live out in Sienna Plantation, 2 miles from here, but now they're in a retirement community now. And after finding out, what went on with the Sugarland 95, I just got thinking there's got to be some more of us
Oh, buried for
buried
sure.
out here somewhere, all over
There's
the
so.
place.
Oh, there are probably hundreds of thousands of us buried. Not maybe not in Sugarland, but there are definitely more people buried.
Yeah, and
Because they didn't
then
even treat them like human. They just felt them. They treat them like a cow. And say, all
mhm,
right, well, the cow died or whatever. Just throw the cow on the ground, like how we bury a pet. That's pretty
right.
much how it went down. Yeah.
And so, when I overlay the current map to the plantation map, so there's a little crescent-shaped lake that I'm living next to right now.
Okay.
And where this blue dot is where I'm living.
Okay.
That same location is right here,
Hmm.
right here on the edge. So,
On the Cunningham Plantation, right
so
there.
Cunningham Plantation. So all of this is Sugarland.
Yeah.
And so this highway here is Highway 90. There's a train track that runs parallel to it.
Hmm.
You cross this train track, you're basically in Houston. And this is the same railroad here on the plantation map.
Yeah.
So these plantations covered a lot of land.
Sometimes I wonder if they still exist. They just repackage the whole thing and just kind of change the. They don't call it a plantation, but they have a system in place that really gets the same kind of result. I think those things to myself sometimes. I'm like, because these people just don't give up money like that. I mean, going through the history that you've shared with us, you see
Mhm.
where everything was calculated. You see where people were just focused on making that money. And maybe they
Yeah.
didn't want to go through fighting wars because it seemed like it was pretty brutal. So the best way to avoid the wars is to repackage what it is that you're doing and
Mhm.
making it something that's a little bit more palatable or a little bit more deceptive where it gets more cooperation. I'm just kind of thinking this thing through because I'm like, they're not giving up that money like that. And they're still making a
Right.
whole lot of money. So what changed along the way? Why did they give up slave labor? And is there any system in place that we have in operation today that might garner more voluntary slave labor that
Mhm.
it just get me thinking deep when I start looking at maps and start looking at systems and railways, and because they have railways to transport items, to transport that sugar and cotton and corn. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, this is good stuff, man. It got me thinking, man. Getting me too deep. Folks not ready to get this deep. Go ahead. Let me stop being too deep right now.
Yeah. So that's basically what the map looks like now and what the map used to look like. And so we come over to the Sugarland 95 where they are now. So this first picture here was during the construction of the James Reese Career and Technical Center. They found this mass grave and they basically started excavating and marking them off, things of that nature, and trying to understand who they are, if they male, female, how old, all that stuff. This is the school. They reinterred the remains over to behind the school. And this is the area that they had cordoned off, where I took my video.
So they still built the school. They still disturbed the people.
School.
They still disturbed. That's what I'm saying. They still disturbed the people.
Yeah.
But they just moved them over a little bit.
When they had stopped the construction, there was a whole lot of arguing back and forth, but because some people wanted the school to be built somewhere else. Don't even touch this. Because
if it was one of them, if it was George Washington or one of them clowns, I guarantee you they would have been like, well.
Yeah, if there was a mass grave of white people, no, they wouldn't be building nothing right there.
Yeah, that would be, it's crazy.
And so they call it the Bullhead Camp Cemetery because that was the name of the prison camp that the inmates were leased to work this land. And down here is what the markers look like now. So that's the presentation. I'm gonna get into the write-up. So let me reshare real quick. Right.
Well, that was good stuff. I mean, a lot I did not know. It prompts me to want to come down there and see for myself. I might need to take a trip down to Houston and come take a look and see, because we hear about the Louisiana Purchase, we hear about Alaska, we hear about Hawaii, we hear it, and we kind of, because they put it in the history books, and half the time we're not even interested in it because we don't understand how it applies to us today until you understand the history of the context of the story. So this is good stuff. People need to know this. Right, and of course, I know a couple of African spots we can visit while you're down here too. I gotta find me some my African food, because really this bridges the gap. The same thing was going on over in Africa. Same thing was going on in Africa, meaning burying communities, burying people, not marking the graves. Same thing, same players. The British and the Dutch and the French and the Spanish. Spanish, not so much. Spanish had a few places in Africa, but the French and the British pretty much had that whole continent, coupled with the Portuguese and the Germans. So you start looking at that, and the Italians had a little bit in certain areas, but you start getting into that whole deal. You start seeing the same scenario with the same purpose. Right. All right.
So this is the background of the Sugarland 95. So October 2017 was when the construction of the school started. And this is when they started digging this, when they dug up some human remains. And so after months of excavating, they discovered remains of 95 people, which consisted of 94 men and 1 woman, which were part of the state-sanctioned convict leasing system until the turn of the 20th century.
So these were people who were prisoners, and they were...
Right.
Okay.
Right.
We know the prison system is nothing but a slave system anyway.
Right. So they were sentenced to time at the Huntsville State Prison, which is 2 hours north of here along Highway 45 in Huntsville, Texas. Okay. Huntsville is where Sam Houston State University is located. And then right across the highway is where the prison is. And
that's where it's been. The prison has been there.
Been there forever. And so when they lease prisoners to work this land, they get them from Huntsville State Prison and bring them down here and work them to the bone.
It's slavery.
Yeah.
You lease a prisoner. How that sound? I'm going to lease a prisoner.
Right. And so that got me to thinking about the movie Life with Martin Lawrence and Eddie Murphy. But that was more of a watered down version of prison leasing. But it's pretty much the same thing.
But that's what I'm saying. Remember what I said a few minutes ago when you were showing the maps? And I said, I have to wonder if the same thing is going on, but it's just been repackaged in a more palatable way where culture won't rejected, where cultures, where it becomes a norm in the psyche of the people, where they say, oh, okay, this is just the way that it is. So there's no wars, there's no fighting, or if it is, it's something that you can even infiltrate the people to get the other people to be quiet in order to maintain the status quo. I'm going to figure this out. You've opened up something, and you know me. Once I get to thinking, I'm going to be thinking about this today, because somehow this whole thing ties in. There's something else. What you just talked about, that system has not gone anywhere. That system is alive. I just got to be able to put it together, and that's what I'm going to do. All right, so we
I
see
like
here.
this right here.
Yeah.
So you saw the special with Ava DuVernay about the 13th Amendment, right?
Yep, I've seen 13th. Yes, I have.
This is how they got around to prison leasing, convict leasing. With that, the loophole within the 13th Amendment, which says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime whereof the parties shall have duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, nor any place subject to their jurisdiction.
So they're colonies. The United States
So
colonies.
basically, when you got locked up, you a slave again.
Yep.
And we can put you right back on a plantation and work you to the bone.
Yeah.
And that's still going on right now.
Absolutely still going on. Insane. Good old USA. Yeah. And this document right here, is this working? This
is on the Fort Bend ISD website.
Yeah, if you could send me.
You can pull this up. If you search Sugarland 95, this will come right up.
Yeah, send me, and when we're done, send me the link. I'll put it in the description, because even when it said on there, talking about the new form of slavery and all of that, it's important for people who are really interested in it, because what it does, again, this empowers you when you have the knowledge, because you can recognize the systems that you're in. If you can't recognize the systems that you're in, then you're just kind of going with the flow. But if you say, wait a minute, this would be encouragement for young brothers and sisters to stay out of the criminal justice system, because they're in essence signing up for slavery. But if you don't know that's what you're meaning when I say that, don't deliberately do things that put you in the criminal justice system, because you're volunteering for slavery, even though it's still modified a little bit, but just understanding how this whole system works and how it's been built.
Right. And so, what was I going to say?
Yeah. I mean, well, while you're getting your thought, that's just something when people are, this is why education is so important. This is why education is so important, because a lot of times we just take what they put in those books and we don't go dig any deeper. I never knew anything about the Sugarland 95. I never knew anything about it. Now let's talk some about this, because I know you're going to talk about this sugar company.
Yeah. So when you look over here, these are the names of the different prison camps where inmates were released to. And of course, they're named after the two Confederate colonels that owned the land.
Okay.
So it was the Freeman camp from 1875 until the end of July 1880. The Littlebury Ellis camp, he had two of them, 1880, 1885 to December 1896. There was another Ellis camp, 1896 to 1907. Imperial Sugar purchased the land in 1907.
Okay.
They were still leasing inmates to work this land, harvesting sugar to go to the mill. From 1907 to 1908, they had a farm camp, a prison farm camp, February 1908 to December 1911. So this is where the connection to Imperial Sugar comes in, because they were leasing inmates too. But of course, all this started, when Texas was just getting started.
Right.
So it just ended up turning into Imperial Sugar, which profited from all of this. these are some of the artifacts and whips and chains that was used. Of course, they had us on chain gangs doing all this harvesting and stuff, working the field, and what they used to pick the cotton, harvest the sugar cane, and all of that stuff. Down here, now they kept real bad records. So, but they kept records of people that were at the Huntsville State Prison who were, being leased out to these plantations. And so these next couple of pages is basically a list of the people who were leased out to work the land.
Did they ever find out the names of the people that were believed to be of the 95?
Now, see, the names that you see here are from the prison records.
Right.
That's not to say that these are they were the actual 95, because what they need to do and what they're working on now is collecting DNA and trying to see if they had any descendants.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that those descendants can come forward before they confirm whether they were the actual Sugarland 95. But this list is just basically the people that were leased from Huntsville prison out to work, these plantations back then.
Okay.
So they don't actually know who are the actual 95 yet. And that's still a work in progress.
Right. The research that'll reveal it.
So all of these people in this list here were, leased out. They broke it down to what their role was, where they came from, how tall, how old, the time of sentence, and when they died, what kind of injuries they had, and all that stuff, what they died of. All of it, as a result of being worked to the bone, being paid for, nothing pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they found the mass grave, they moved their remains over to where the Bullhead Camp Cemetery is now, had a dedication of the cemetery, things of that nature. So what they plan on doing next is constructing an outside memorial, in the cemetery, much like, an MLK monument or something like that. And hopefully, they'll be able to find descendants who were actually part of the Sugarland 95, because this is another reason for paying reparations.
Yep. Just one more reason. This is fascinating stuff. And I think that, it's definitely what I hope this conversation does, and this is the first of a 2-part series.
Mm-hmm.
What I hope that this will do is spark people to go research Sugarland 95. And I want to come to Houston and just kind of see this space for myself. It's like, again, part of this show is, no, not part of what this whole show is about, and this channel and everything I do is about bridging the gap. And when you bridge these different gaps of information, culture, finance, all of these different gaps that have been put in place, this is why this is so very valuable. In knowing the story about the Sugarland 95, understanding the connections to the sugar industry and how people were not compensated for their work, the work that they've done. And that's all throughout American history. And I don't understand how people can't grasp that and are very content. There are a lot of people like us, a lot of Black folks, a lot of so-called African Americans who are very content with the fact that this happened and leaving it with it happened without understanding that it's still happening, unless they get into that elite class and then they forget where they came from and then they become imperial in their mindset and colonial in their mindset. They forget. They don't even care about this. They don't even want to know about it. They don't even want their children to know about it. You'd be amazed at the things that I hear coming out of people's mouths that look like us. It's like, it's like, yo, what are y'all thinking about? But will
Mhm.
cry foul about racism in America. They will cry. They'll be the first ones marching and all of that, but won't even be interested in stuff like this and understanding the systemic implications for all of these years when it comes back to Sugarland and places like Sugarland throughout what we now know as America. So yeah,
Right. So they've got a whole project going on down here where they've sent samples and DNA to University of Connecticut where they're, conducting this DNA project, and they've got information here where you can donate and all of that.
cool. All
Uh,
right.
I guess we can save part two for a little bit of history about my
Yeah.
own family, because I've got a little Black history within my own family as well.
Oh, okay, okay.
We can probably do that when you come down.
Yeah, but you know what? That's what we do. What we'll do is we'll pick this up when I come to Houston,
Okay.
and then you can tell me more about the family history, and then we can do something on site right there, Sugarland,
Mhm.
right there at the grave site, because I really, really want people to be able to kind of see and get a taste of it. And then we can talk more about the family, and you can break down even more about this aspect of our history that so many people don't know. And hopefully, what it'll do is spark other people to find pieces of history like this in their own communities and to
Mhm.
bring it to the forefront. So, if somebody out there is watching and you know some other history in this country that we now know as America that should be shared, then please reach out to me and let me know, because I would love to be able to have those conversations. And I love these conversations. So here's the deal. To be continued. I'm coming down to Houston. I'm coming to Sugarland, and I'm gonna do this before I go back over to Africa. And I want to be able to see this, because this is how we empower one another. That's how we bridge the gap, because many of those people are descendants of Africa. Now here we are in a position to be able to share this information. So everybody, I've been talking to Elliot, Jordan, and I guess you can. It's a screen. I guess you can go ahead and unshare the screen there.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been talking to Elliot Jordan. He was a part of the Fun Bunch over in Ghana last year, October 2021. We've been talking about the Sugarland 95. He shared an extensive amount of information about the history of Texas, Mexico, the Louisiana Purchase, the Spanish involvement, things I never knew. Things I never knew. I just got a history lesson here today that will empower me now when I go and start asking more questions. How many other places went through what Sugarland went through? How many other places in America? How many places in Africa? Who knows? We're going to keep this conversation going. I'm going to go down to Sugarland and talk to Elliot in person. And what I encourage everybody to do is to go see things for yourself. There are many places in America where you can get history that you won't even find in Africa. What Africa did for me was sparked an interest to even want to learn the history that's in America, so I can honor my ancestors on both sides, my African ancestors and my ancestors who are of African descent here in America, honoring both of them by making sure that we have not forgotten them and that we continue to bridge this gap. We continue to educate on all levels and help people to be able to see clearly and get out of this fog of nationalism and imperialism that we have been indoctrinated with. So, Elliot, man, hey, this conversation is great. So, to be continued.
Yes,
Next
sir.
time you see me, I will be in H-Town.
All
I'm
right.
not going to say what I was going to say. I'm glad I caught myself on that one.
We'll send you some good Southern hospitality when you get here.
That's what I know. I know it. I got to get me some good Southern food too. So,
Oh yeah. Oh
all right,
yeah.
man. So appreciate it. Listen, everybody, be sure to like, subscribe, share this information. Click the thumbs up. Be sure to hit the subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell so you can get notifications on all of the new videos that we're releasing. So that's the deal. Until next time, take care. Be safe. All right, all right. There you go. So that was the Sugarland 95. I'm going down to H-Town. And when I get to H-Town, I'm going to take the camera. Elliot and I will be there talking about it even more. But what I do want to encourage everybody to do, for those who are in the U.S., to understand, because I'm telling you, there are a lot of people who are trying to say that we aren't connected and all these other things. And it's like, no, we're very much connected. I want to show you a clip real quick of a place that I went to, the Oyotunji Yoruba village in right outside of Beaufort, South Carolina. I'm going to talk about that. And guess what? Right outside of Beaufort, South Carolina. I mean, that's important to understand. It's Beaufort, South Carolina. Take a look. And It's real quick. It's a real quick clip, meaning this is just kind of like a preview to let you know. But this is in South Carolina, not Nigeria. South Carolina, United States. It's not like it's not like an amusement park or anything. It's a real African Yoruba village. Take a look. There it is. That's real. That's real right there. That's going to be a great conversation because I'm really going to talk about my journey. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and how, it's going to be really, really deep. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and my family never talked about Africa. If they did, it was never spoken in a positive way, but everybody went to an African Methodist Episcopal Zion church. Think about that for a second. They got the African in the church, whether it's African AME Zion or AME or whatever, African, I don't know, whatever. And never, we went there, there was the white Jesus sitting up in the stained glass, the white Jesus on the fans, the white Jesus everywhere. But it got African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. And that's what, and nobody ever talked about it. So I go all of my life. And then this village is literally like 30 minutes away from where I was born. I mean, maybe 45 minutes, beautiful, maybe an hour. Somewhere in that range from where I was born. This stuff is deep, y'all, because it's been so ingrained and so twisted, that we just accept it. It's really sad. But guess what? I'm going after the next generation and those who in this present generation, whether it's boomers, Xers, millennials, or Gen Z, and Gen Y, I think is coming, or some Gen Y is after them or something like that. Even the Gen Zs are having babies now. Lord have mercy. But it's like, this is all a part of it. This is of us having these conversations. So I want to shout out Elliot once again. I will be on location in Sugarland very soon. I also have a series where I'm going to take you to Sierra Leone. I got some clips from Sierra Leone. We're going to have a conversation with some folks from Sierra Leone. Let me see. I'll do a reel. Let me see. Let me just see how long that clip is. I don't want to play a long one because I know we've been on here for a while. Let's see. I'll find a short one. But just kind of give you some insight into where we're going to go with Sierra Leone. Okay, I won't play the whole clip, but just to I just play a little piece of this right here. But this is where we want to go with Sierra Leone because I had some great conversation in Sierra Leone. So just a little snippet right here just to give you an idea. So I just showed you the Oyotunji village, Yoruba village in South Carolina. Now I'm going to take you back across the ocean. That's how we bridge the gap. I'm going to take you back over just for a little bit in Sierra Leone. I'll show the whole thing coming up soon, but just take a look at this.
Tell me about the culture.
Different cultures have their own way of practicing their culture. Like what you just saw here was a cross section of the Mende. If you go to the Limba, they have their own way of dancing, doing their cultures. And when you go to the Timini, they too have the different way. You understand? So the Fula too have their own, but they dance is different. But they embrace Islam. So
majority of them are Christian.
Islam.
I'm sorry, are Muslim. 99.9% of them are Muslim.
And then which is like the Pula.
Yeah, so they practice.
And the Femini, let's say 98% of them are also Islam.
No, Sierra Leone as a whole wide has the largest population of
most
Islam.
of them are Christians and they are Roman Catholics. So you can see the Mende as the largest tribe. They believe in education more. Why is the Timini believe in business? They travel a lot. They are every part in this country.
Them and the Fula.
Yeah,
They
they are the
believe
Fula.
in
So the
business.
Timothy and the Fula are business people.
They are business people. They are traders.
And the Mende are. Oh, that's gonna be a good one. They said some good things. They dropped some stuff, so I can't wait to share that with you as I take you on location in Sierra Leone. I'm gonna be taking you to the Nubian village in Egypt. You're gonna go inside of there. But later on today, I'm gonna do a talk. I did a post on Facebook. I had to remember which one. And this post got some folks talking. And this post, here's the question I posed. I was kind of waxing philosophical, for some people may consider it that, but that's what I said, depending on who you ask. I said, so why do many, because even this whole like religion thing is deep between what's going on in Africa and what happens with many African Americans. So the question I asked is, why do so many women attend church and so many men don't? Part one. So I'm going to really break down, and I talked about my observations over 25 years. So these are personal observations, and I will share why I'm particularly versed on, why I'm particularly skilled in this particular area. So I'll share a little bit about it, and it's going to be a deep conversation. I'm going to do it a little bit later on tonight. It's going to be a deep conversation, and it's going to cause some people to think. And I'm going to share with you why it's part of the decolonization process, but it's also part of bridging the gap. And it's also a part of, if people really want the truth, you got to ask these uncomfortable questions. But I'm going to break down something. I'm going to go like, I say line upon line. I'm going to go through all of that in the post. If you go to my Facebook page, you can go to J. Cameron on Facebook, then you'll be able to see the post on my public profile page, also on my personal page. But it's really deep. And when I share with you some of the things that I have seen over 25 years, it will definitely cause you to think. But you know what? It's all done in an effort to help us to bridge this gap and wake up and just kind of be on a different page and just to be on a different level. So that'll be later on tonight. All you got to do is just lock in. I'll post it. An alert will come up. All you got to do is subscribe to the channel, and then you'll get the alert. And that's how you do, because we'll be doing quite a few things like this, because I'm getting ready to head back over. I tell you, I got something coming down the pike. I'm getting ready to head back over to Ghana, but I have Senegal. I have a very busy spring. Kenya, Nigeria, Tanzania, Senegal, South Africa, all of those places I'll be going to this spring. We're getting ready to release our Nigeria trip for August. That's coming down the pike. And our South Africa trip for September. We have Ghana trips for this summer. We have Tanzania for this summer, and then we have Egypt for the fall, and then we also have some Ghana for the winter. So hey, lots coming down the pike, because it's one thing to sit here and talk about, it's another thing to go and be in person and lead people to be able to see it. And that's why I take you inside a lot of this. I'm gonna take you to the Whitney Plantation. I'm gonna take you to where else? Oh, Benin and Togo. Some things in Benin and Togo that I saw, you're just not going to believe it till you see it with your own eyes. I'm going to let you see it with your own eyes. So that's what it's all about. And we also continue to bridge the gap while we educate our children. That's why getting the Adventures of Darren and Destiny children's book series is so important, because they won't grow up with all of this misinformation, because we have materials and resources on age-appropriate levels for our children between the ages of 4 to 10. And adults are getting a lot out of it too. So anyway, talk to you soon. See you a little bit later on this evening. Make sure you subscribe, like, share, hit that like button, and hit the alert bell so you can stay up to speed on everything that we have going on here with Maximum Impact with J. Cameron. See you soon.
Open up your eyes and see all the fun and mystery. Take an African adventure with Darren and Destiny. From the mountains to the shore, so many things to explore. Take an African adventure with Darren and Destiny.